are coming out already.
Goodness.
Yeah, it's all right. May have to. No, we're good. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, stand by. We're getting ready to go live. Just have to hit a couple more buttons here, and hopefully the gremlins won't get us. Yeah, all right. Here we go. We have Sri Master Gano Grills, the man, the legend, the way of life. Had a couple opportunities to speak with him before. Great time. Really nice guy. His energy is through the roof. He does these really cool seminars where he teaches classes on how to help activate the Kundalini, the third eye, different energy modalities and such. And you can tell just after talking to him for 30 seconds that he's the real deal. A lot of people make specific claims that I don't feel they even can back up with the paper that they write it on. You know, it's not even worth the paper that they write it on. And what Gano does is a lot more intense, in my opinion, where he really, the energy is it's almost like you can see it. And his life path, his experiences, the things that he's done, the people that he's met, he's been in some very influential circles. So we're going to talk not only about what he does, but also we're going to talk about him and kind of what got him to that point. So it's an honor to speak with you. How the heck are you?
I'm doing very well, Rex. Thank you so much for having me on your platform once again. You know, I always enjoy the time that, you know, we speak exploring things. I've been really good. It's been a very busy time. And we're preparing for a seminar in Las Vegas, of all places, which is very interesting. So that's going to be November 4th and 5th. And it's a really interesting time, Rex, because right now, this post-ecliptic energy has brought to bear some very strange occurrences, you know what I mean? But I think that my heart goes out to all of the places that have been ravaged in California. You know, the decimation is, it's amazingly catastrophic. And in Puerto Rico and Texas and all of the other places. And, you know, just all of the distractions that are going on. A lot of this, you know, has occurred right after the ecliptic. And, you know, a full-on solar eclipse brings about those things. It's very interesting. So it's really important that people at this time come together and, you know, have a spiritual base. You know what I mean? So I'm very grateful that I personally have not been touched by that, and I hope you haven't either, and some of the people listening in the audience.
Oh, yeah, I've been very fortunate. It's amazing. You look at those pictures from California, Santa Rosa area, and those houses were incinerated. It's a very extreme fire that happened so fast. It seems like this is the year of cataclysms, and a lot of people are going through a lot of trials and tribulations. You know, obviously, if you're one of those people, the best way to make it through, in my opinion, is to have a very strong mind and spirit and know where you're going and be able to kind of understand your inner self as you're going through those trials and tribulations. But, you know, one thing that I really appreciate about you is, especially last time that we talked, you were discussing how the, you know, angels and gods and these higher deities oftentimes are in the entertainment industry.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's very powerful. And I was kind of skeptical at first when you talked about it, but the more that I've really researched it and the more that I have studied the media, let's go back to the 1980 film Flash Gordon. I mean, even Flash Gordon, they were pushing the Anunnaki, Isis, Enki, Enlil, I feel, that the Gigi people, the bird people, and many of these beings that were described in these ancient tablets that predate much of the Bible, that go back 6,000 to 7,000 years, that are stories from even 200,000 years ago. I mean, getting into the Dumazid story, Ananana, if you read the Sumerians Kings list, Dumazid went back 230,000 years, and he ruled for 36,000 years. Well, this story in this clay tablet talks about that event, and it's just incredible. So I would like to know more about you and what it's like, especially for you being in the Hollywood industry, meeting some amazing people, having friends like Samuel Jackson, etc. What is a god? What is an angel? And what are some of those archetypes like? Are they reincarnating? And I know this is a lot of questions, but I know that you can keep.
I'll do my best. I think your mic is muted. I'll do my best to entertain that and to answer the question as succinctly as I can. One of the things that I explain to people is that the gods, by and large, are not, they're not earthlings. Notice how I didn't say human. A lot of the gods can take on a human form that is very, very vast. If the gods were to matriculate their form to a human container, they would be about 55 feet tall. And when you go to Kemet or Egypt, if you go to the place called Saqqara, you will see 4 giant beings that are approximately 55 feet tall, which are larger than a lot of the Sumerian depictions of some of the demigods in Mesopotamian times or Chaldean times. And these beings are real, and they are from the 5th dimension. They would be gods in comparison to what the human ability is not. So gods are too big to fit into the limitation of the mechanics of our reality. The mechanics of our reality do not house the antithetical nature of what the gods are, by and large. It would be virtually impossible for a god to fit into this reality in the way that it would be impossible for you, Rex, to fit into a thimble. It's just not going to happen. However, you can get your pinky inside of the expanse of the thimble. And if there are any dissidents or citizens living inside of the bottom of that thimble, they would get the eclipse of the presence of your pinky. So there are certain gods that humans know nothing about. And there are gods that, we know very, very little about the gods. As many as there are if you look in the ancient Sumerian text, if you look in the ancient Kemet, which is ancient Egypt, if you look at the Neturu, the Ogdu, the Ennead, the Olympians, the Vedas, there's a very vast complex of gods that number, and let's just put it into an algorithm, right? Let's just say if we put all of the books about the world's mythologies into one codex, it probably would be under 2,000 gods. There are many, many times more than that are not knowable to humans. They've not been made available. However, if you go into the Pyramid of Alexandria, and a lot of that information has been squirreled away into private collections of certain families and certain institutions like the Smithsonian or the Louvre in Paris or the Vatican, and I've been to all of these places. They are in private collections. So when you look at the Emerald Tablets, which is written on an indestructible format, Emerald Tablets weren't the only books written or the only text written or the only discs that exist. When you look at CDs or CD-ROMs, or if you look at, there was a time where they had this really big, thick record. I forget what it was called, but it was supposed to be the latest craze. It looked like a 12-inch record, but it was a little thicker. And it was something that I would say back in 1994 was supposed to be the new direction of technology, but it was just too big. It was too clunky, and it quickly went the way of the dinosaur. So when you look at the expanse of the gods, we really don't know much about them, even with all of the mythologies that are available to us. And I've had some very interesting interactions with some of the gods, and they laugh at humans a lot. They laugh at the pontifications of how humans assume their identity, of how there are certain people that actually call themselves gods, goddesses, empresses, almighty, all of these lofty attributes that actually do belong to the gods. I'm going to show you a statue of a very powerful, see this? This is what a god actually looks like. And if you look, there are many heads stacked on top of this particular rendition of Kuan Yin. Now, the reason that the statue looks that way, and you look at all of the heads, it represents the it represents the labyrinth of knowledge and abilities to be in many different places at the same nanosecond and function individually at the same time. The gods are capable of this. They are omniscient to a large degree. So when you're able to tap in and get their favor, they can do things for you that would take you 100 lifetimes to do, but they'll accomplish it in one lifetime. And that's the benefit of making a conscious connection with some of the gods that are actually friendly to humans.
You know, I'm so glad you brought that up. I actually just picked up a book that has, you know, over 2,000 deities of the world, encyclopedia of the gods, and it's amazing when you read up on some of these different deities and what they require, what they provide. If you've seen the series American Gods on on TV, love it, absolutely love it. It's one of my favorite series, right. And I think I like it a little too much. I ended up having a dream that I was Odin and I was fighting other gods. It was very bizarre, but right. Yeah, it was pretty cool. But nonetheless, what you're saying I find fascinating. So what is a god to you? What is your definition of a god? Because I think that a lot of people, especially that are raised from certain religious mindsets, including myself, I used to be that guy that if I would have heard this conversation 15 years ago, I'd be like, you heathens, you antichrist, you're going to hell. Right. That's what I would have thought 15 years ago. And now I have a completely different mindset, but still, I mean, you probably get that, don't you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, unfortunately, there are, and I don't want to be disrespectful to anyone's belief. I respect where everyone is respectively. And unfortunately, there are people that have a certain mindset that they will argue something that they can't prove. They will argue with dogma, theology, theosophy, or a religion that they really can't trace the origin of how it was progenitated or genesis. And that's preposterous. Humans have a condition that makes them have an egoic, arrogant attachment to something that hasn't really been proven to them. So I'll use myself as an example. When I was a young man, I believed, you know, I grew up like everyone else in the church, and there were certain things about Christianity that just, if you're honest with yourself, that didn't make sense. And one of those things was, okay, so Jesus died for my sins. He paid the ransom for the inequity of the sins that I don't know that I've committed. So that means that if he was nailed on the cross and he paid for the future of the sins of people who haven't even come into the world, the pretense of that means that that imperative should have caused mass anarchy, mass bedlam, because there's an archetype of a man who was slated to be God himself. Some people actually pray to him as God, the Almighty. And he was put on the cross to pay for your sins, which means that you should be able to do whatever you want to do because it's already been excused. And I said, you know, there's something about that that doesn't make sense, because that would be antithetical to law and order that I would think that the Creator would want to have on all of his creative platforms, which Earth, I believe, to be one of them. So when I went to the pastors and the preachers to ask about that, I got sneered at quite a lot, and it's not something that they could answer. And I wrote down a good 15 or 20 of them at an early age. And what that taught me when I referenced and I looked outside of that and I studied and I came across other books that are older than the amalgamation of what the Bible compository is, it taught me that, you know, the Bible is probably one sentence in the syllabus of a library that has a lot more weight and levity behind it, you know. So it's important for people to be honest enough to realize and really check in with the value and the logic of what it is that your belief system is hinged upon, and not be afraid to look at the reality and the common sense of something else. And if it resonates in your soul and in your spirit, it's probably more aligned with what your logic will allow you to glean, as opposed to holding on and fighting avaricelessly for something that you know is really not the truth.
Absolutely. And let's talk about this for a minute, because the research that I've done, it sounds like you've studied a multitude of cultures. And I've studied the Sumerians, their pantheon, the Greeks, the Egyptian, obviously the Hebrew texts, the Judaic texts. And I find an underlying theme in many of these. Even if you read through the Nag Hammadi, the Gnostic scriptures as well, they talk about the archons, the demiurge, etc. It seems as if Enki oftentimes is Enki is also possibly Poseidon. Enki might be Yal the Baoth. I used to think Enlil was Yal the Baoth, but now I'm wondering that as well. But it seems like there's these two sides. There's these two factions, and it's like we're in this dualistic universe right now. So it's like we choose a side, and choose your side wisely. But I think about how the Hindus or Hindu religion, they would believe in a numerous amount of gods. I think they believed in up to 320 million gods. So most religions and belief systems believe in a multitude of gods. It seems like there's this process, many people that are raised Christian or have a certain religion in the States, they think it's just blasphemous to think about anything else but this one God. But then you read through these texts and these scriptures, and what they did is they adopted all these different gods, and they're okay, nope, just one God, just one, that's it. Even the Holy Bible is a multitude of gods I feel in the Old Testament that they just try to incorporate into one God. Am I a conspiracy theorist? Yes, but I still think I'm right on that.
Right. I think that, withstanding everything that you said, and I'll conjunct that by saying that one of the major pitfalls of humans being able to reach a much grander degree of their own spirituality is have no other gods before me. And when you come across that one passage, it basically has you put in, it's a seed that's planted inside of your consciousness to the point where when someone like me comes along or someone else and they talk about the other gods, you automatically shut down. And I remember being a young man and having that was the first file that would come up, and I would automatically shoot down and not entertain the reality of other gods or other beings. And meanwhile, in the Bible, when you look at it, it gives you a list of some of the other gods that the demigods of the Bible knew about. It talks about Baal, and it talks about some of the other star systems. Even back then, they knew that these other gods were real. And what I ask people, I say, well, how is it that, people are able to say, my God is stronger than your God? You can't say that the creator is something that you own and you have in your back pocket and say it's mine. And mine means it's not yours if you're proclaiming ownership over a God. And then if you have to look at, even if you look at certain other texts, God is like me calling you man. Your name is Rex Bear, but if I refer to you as man, man can be attributed to probably half of the population, of which there are roughly 7.5 billion, but it doesn't accurately describe the synthesis of who the person is by their rightful name. So when someone says God, they're addressing a menagerie of, it could fit to anyone. Or someone says Lord. Lord is a title of a supreme being, also known as a God. Lord is actually a rank of angelic beings. There are gods, lords, and Lord gods. And that's not something that's really known in the Bible, yet you're supposed to pray to God. So really, the God of the Bible, and let's just say Anu, right? Anu was smart enough to say, I'm going to create the template of this religion, and every time someone prays to God, that is going to be usurped, and the energy will go to me, then it will go to my children. That's what I personally have discovered, which is interesting. So everyone who's praying to God, unfortunately, that's not going to the creator. And then the next thing I would say, the creator of all does not need prayers from humans, the same way you don't need any adulation or praise from ants that may exist in your backyard. It's not going to sustain you or give you anything that you don't already have or couldn't produce yourselves. So it's preposterous for humans to think that God is in need of your praise. Then you have to go back to what Anu set in motion, and it's quite insidious. So basically, people say, oh God, when they're having an orgasm. Anu is getting that energy. He's literally getting the praise and the energetic outburst that and the euphoria that comes from someone who, and I have to say, you know, if you look at pornography, if you go back to some of the bright moments that you've had during that time of a heightened orgasmic awareness, you said, oh God. And, you know, somebody's getting the check for that. But this is not something that people are willing to look at. And it needs to be unearthed and it needs to be vetted out.
That's strong right there. I'm glad you brought that up. A lot of people as well, when they pray and they say amen, I've heard that they're actually giving their energy to Marduk. If there's a connect, I can't confirm this, but I've heard this from very intelligent people, much smarter than myself, that they're actually, amen is linked to Marduk. Now, what you're saying brings up a very good point, though, about Anu being the creator of this matrix. A lot of people feel that Lucifer might be in control of this matrix right now. Yet I think Lucifer is just one of the players. And Lucifer might actually not even be, you know, most people, when they think of Lucifer, they probably think of a devil with horns and a whip at the tail with a little, you know, like a trifecta fork there at the end, the trident. But I mean, that is kind of a Vatican pushed approach as well. And then you look at the fruit of the Vatican and institutions that are similar to the Vatican that have hidden so much information from people and brainwashed people and made them think if they just go outside of that box just a little bit, they don't go into confession every week and pray, they're going to spend eternity in hell and purgatory. And it's this fear-based mind control that, if you think about it, most people, they're born into it. They're literally born into it. Even in the womb, in their mom, they're still being programmed that there's this place called hell if you don't do exactly what the Pope or your preacher or your pastor tells you to do. It's very scary. And it makes me, so let's talk more. This is great. Please tell me more about your, and I want to get into the Kundalini and what the Kundalini is, what the third eye activation is. Then I'll share a personal story about how I had an image taken with Kirlian photography once where my aura was just this dark burgundy red, the whole thing. So I was stuck in the root chakra, but we'll get to that a whole other podcast. It was just very interesting. But so tell, what do you think about that, this matrix setup? So these players are all just kind of playing for Anu?
Well, I would say that Anu was, well, first of all, let's go back to what the epoch says. It says that they were master geneticists. And one shar is equivalent to 3,600 years of our Earth cyclic time. 1 year to them is, you know, is more than an age for us. So when you look at their lifespan, they're able to really, if you look at 3,600 years, you could learn quite a bit in that period, which is the reason that they unplugged the telomeres to bypass the ability for humans to live long enough to trace the crime over a long expanse of time. So they say, okay, so man's life is not going to go past 120. But of course, we know that there are people all around the world that live to be 215, but it's not really something that is, it's something that the media blacks out because they don't want people even thinking that they could live that long. So the Matrix is, I feel, is a definite it is a simulated reality that we are all parts in. And there's enough data that even NASA can produce that intimates that. If you look at how all of the synthesis of your coincidences, when you think about someone and the next thing you know, you're looking at a block that is named after that person and all of the strange synchronistic events that occur throughout the day if you're paying attention. What you're really looking at is a bleed through of mathematical codes that show the connection between how you think and how things appear in reality. And if you look at science, it says that nothing exists until you put your attention on it. So if you don't think about it, it doesn't exist. If you look at the reality that someone can create by their own intention, if you look at, let's say, someone like Donald Trump is someone, you know, our president, he has inserted himself into the arena of being the president, and the world by and large is diametrically opposed to that outside of his supporters. How was he able to do that? And then if you go back and you look at some of the books that have been written, I'm sure you've heard about Ingersoll Lockwood and how they talk about a book that was written in 1895 and another book written in 1905 that basically talk about Donald Trump. Ingersoll Lockwood, in my opinion, is someone who was like Nostradamus and able to look into the future and see certain things that were going to play out, and wrote a lighthearted, one of the books were 244 pages and the other book was 100 pages. But both of those books were describing what's going on now, from his hotels on Fifth Avenue to the backlash and the upheavals that are going on, the little skirmishes that are in opposition to him being in office, to him in Google. Even talks about Goggle-land, which is really the internet Google, and how a world within a world, which is the World Wide Web, how it exposes you to other worlds. And it talks about Vladimir Putin, who a lot of people feel also is not only possibly an immortal, but a time traveler. You know, there are pictures of someone that looks exactly like Vladimir Putin, 1921, 1940, in the now. And he's a man of formidable means. So when you put these things together, and the pompous, arrogant way in which Donald Trump carries himself, literally, if you look at someone who studies pathology and body language, that man knew a long time ago that he was going to be the president, and he was able to go back into time, put certain things in motion, and now we all have to look at it for what it is. So the programs in the Matrix, that's what we're speaking about, that were put into motion, were allowing a test run a few different times to see what the American populace is going to accept. So let's put Sarah Palin out there. Let's see if there is an opposition to her. Oh, she has support. Oh, there's not a backlash. Okay, so that means that we can put Donald Trump, and we'll put him in, what is the show? The Apprentice. And we'll see how that goes. The show was wildly successful. Now we're going to put him in the White House. First, we'll put Obama in there. We'll placate some of the, the needs of certain people, and then we'll put our agenda in there. And I want to tell you something. It's, Donald Trump is someone who is dividing the country. He's dividing people. And, divide and conquer is something which is an age-old algorithm that brings about a lot of destruction. And he can easily take us to war. So when you're talking about North Korea, and you're talking about Russia, and you're dealing with all of these possibilities of one man's ego versus the need for the machine to make money, because war produces money, it looks like it's something that we actually may have to sit back and watch if he's not impeached. The people don't demand him out of the office. The fallout that is basically slated to come by his presence in there, people really don't come together. We're going to have to ride out something that's not going to be cool. So, the Matrix, by and large, is a menagerie of different realities. Hollywood is always producing movies about darkness and the last day on Earth, and the White House is falling. Why would we make a movie that espouses the potential for that happening? Why would we make movies like Mad Max that show, this post-apocalyptic reality? It must be an agenda that is being beckoned to, our planet to live out. And when you look behind the curtain and you see who is bankrolling some of these agendas, there are other beings that want the world, obviously, to be something more habitable and delightful to them. And that's a whole nother subject. Obviously, I'm talking about some of the other beings that aren't human, that want to scorch the land and make it hot and arid. But then you have other beings that want to make the world cold and frigid, and they are heating up the planet. There are interdimensional beings that are coming from different dimensions of reality. And you can go to Art Bell and listen to some of the people that have called in and talked about what the other dimensions are like. How, we didn't win the Civil War, and how Black people were never really freed as slaves, and where they're living at, and what it's like. and how, the Confederate States of America is what is on those dimensions of reality. So then you have to realize that the matrix is different timelines, different dimensions of reality, time rips, openings in the portals of how to get from this timeline to that timeline. And then they all kind of, sometimes they do this, they overlap, and then they create the Mandela effect, or they create different things. And then the people that are in power, they have to go and do ritual to place energy back to the distortion in time that they've created, so that there's not a major wobble that throws everything off. And this is something that people are just now beginning to realize, but it's been known about in the government. It's been known by the families that have the power for a very long time. And it's things that they've been using for quite a while. And we just have to sit back and hope that, and I don't want to get too far into the conspiratorial because I like to empower people, but just because you asked, the matrix is that and a lot more. And I just gave you a couple of topics of what's going on the board game of the matrix.
Absolutely. And what I've noticed also is it seems like with these cyclical timelines that are played out, they go from one extreme to the other. First it's we got to go in Iraq. Bush Jr. goes in Iraq, and then we got, oh no, the boogeyman is Osama bin Laden and Saddam Hussein. Those are the boogeymen, right? That's the push that they give you. And then when Obama makes it into office, total opposite of Bush. And then what's interesting though, I mean, isn't it bizarre that if you look at a bumper sticker of Obama and Biden, and then overlay Osama bin Laden over Obama Biden, there's more to coincidence than that. There's two letters that are different. And what are the two letters? BS. It's crazy.
Wow.
So I feel that they're, the powers that be, the globalists or whatever these higher powers or these lower entities that control people, I almost feel like they're these deities that they like to use the exact opposite 4 years down the road, 8 years later, a black president gets in office, and I think that's great, and I think it does give inspiration for people out there that have more pigmentation in their skin and maybe were treated differently because of the color of their skin, which is ridiculous. I never really saw stuff like that. It's interesting because I look back 15 years ago and I didn't really see that kind of stuff on the media. I didn't see these like race wars and stuff going on. I mean, yes, there's places that's always been going on, but it seems like the media is using that now. They're like, oh, we're gonna throw the race card out there. We're gonna throw the religious card out there. Now we're gonna make the next president is gonna be really white and he's gonna have really blonde hair. It's like they're just trying to do the exact opposite to us. So right. I'm under the impression that there's these influences behind the scenes that in this eclipse that just happened that divided the nation literally from the 33rd degree. It started the 33rd state and it ended at the 33rd degree parallel in South Carolina. That was very symbolic. So let's talk about the energy work and stuff that you've noticed and these different levels and different archetypes. Do they use these specific timelines with the stars to be like it's like a feeding ground to them? Is it a way that they control energy and obtain energy, kind of like you were talking about earlier when someone's having sex and they're like, oh my God, they're giving that energy to a deity that maybe they shouldn't?
Well, one of the things I'll say is that when you have, let's say Wonder Woman, and you saw that movie, right? Okay.
Oh, absolutely. I've even got Wonder Woman right behind me. It's funny you brought that up because I meet this lady. Real quick. When talking to you, when the universe is talking to you, I start doing research on Inanna and the Sumerian tablets, and I think that Wonder Woman is Inanna, aka Ishtar. So literally the day after I start doing research on Inanna, I meet a lady. Her name's Brady that painted this beautiful painting of Wonder Woman right behind me there. See that?
Wow. Nice. Very nice.
So it's like, here you go, right there in front of you. So yeah, please continue. I didn't mean to dive into it.
So yeah, it's like, it's great timing. And when you look at that movie, and for anyone out there who hasn't seen it, it gives you an idea of how certain gods can project their will onto the delicate minds of humans to have their will exerted or realized. And if you look in that movie, the god Ares was able to influence the industry of war, at the same time empower the vicegerents or his henchmen, make them very powerful. Hitler was one of those people, Mussolini, Idi Amin. There have been many people who have created many genocides and large genocides, but you have to be empowered to do so. So the energy of carnage, destruction, and confusion, havoc, is sustained, and it's an energy source that goes to that god of war or that god of confusion. There are other gods that see that, and they require something different. They require love, healing. They actually empower their people to do something different in the world, which is good. I like to liken myself to, dealing with those gods. So when we deal with gods that are of, let's just say, light and love, and they're connected to the creator of all, and they're not self-serving gods to sustain themselves through the aperture of degradation and devolve or devolution, they're here to help the planet to grow and evolve. And the two are constantly butting heads. So there are times where it looks like evil is going to overshadow the power of the light. And there are other times where the light begins to overshadow. Really, it's in the hands of people and what people lean towards. It's always oscillating. There are people every day that wake up to the reality of their larger abilities. And then there are people in waves that, unfortunately, they plummet and they devolve. So there's a constant barrage and a projection that's being offered to people to go backwards and to dumb down and to be, I have to say this, there's a lady named Cardi B. She's a pretty, artist that just shot up the charts, and I think that she usurped Taylor Swift, and she's like either number 2 or number 1 right now on the pop charts, I believe. And how did she do that? She was a stripper, and if you looked at her at the BET Awards, she's someone that a lot of these young girls are going to mimic. They're going to want to become strippers, and they're going to want to dumb down the potential of what they can be. But this is an agenda that is being fueled by a different principality. And if humans don't start out thinking that and looking at what these assaults are, we can be in a really bad place. So one of the things I do is I point those things out, and I ask people to consider aligning themselves with other principalities that basically have the best interest of humanity in their heart. And there are many beings that actually do. So when you begin to work with them, not work for them, but when you begin to align yourself with them, it empowers you to a large degree, and the reality of darkness just doesn't reach you. So that's one of the things that I say, when I have seminars for people, and right now we're about ready to do the Big Picture seminar. And I'll give you an example. I have a device that I got from Lord Thoth. Lord Thoth gave me a very interesting connection to something called the Ankh. When I went to Egypt a few years ago, I went into some temples and I heard his voice in the back of my head, and I knew it was him. And one of the things he asked, he says, "Gano, what do you see in all of these temples?" And I thought about it for a minute, because I went to about 5 or 6 temples at that time. And it popped into my mind, and I said, the Ankh. And then I heard, now use it. I said, okay. And that was the end of the transmission. So I went to a museum and I brought an alabaster Ankh. And I jokingly pointed it at my friend, who we were in Egypt at the same time, and they fell off of their feet. I said, well, what happened? And they said, it felt like my chakras were blasted out of my body when you pointed that Ankh at me. And I said, that's interesting. So I started to connect more with the energy of the Ankh. And what I discovered is that there is a lot of people wear an Ankh, but it's a flat representation, the way a car, if you had a car without an engine It's not going to go anywhere, but it still has the representation of the car. The energy that goes inside of the Ankh and other things, it unlocks a power that connects you to your Kundalini, and it also connects you to your divine parents. So when you look at the gods and you look at the pharaohs and you look at a lot of the people, they're always carrying an Ankh. The reason that they carry the Ankh is because it was a power connection to their divine parents from Sirius, Orion, and different star constellations that kept them connected to their base of power. I created something through the energy of what they gave me. It was called a cosmic beacon. And it is a device. And if you go to my website, I don't have any pictures of it because I was told not to cause, what happens is they're displayed at my seminars. So when people come to the seminars, there's a table that has the cosmic beacons there. And when people look at the cosmic beacons, their chakras begin to spin wildly. When people touch the encasement of it, sometimes people begin to shake. It is somewhat of an ark of a covenant that connects them to their divine parents. So there have been people that have gotten the cosmic beacon. And once they activate it, because it comes with a certain set of directions that I've been given from Lord Taught, people will be walking down the block and they'll be made to look up in the sky and they will see the clouds form the face or the body of the God that created the energy of their soul. And they'll look up and see this and they'll connect and there'll be a radiation of energy that downloads into their body. And when that sequencing period is complete, the clouds will go back to where they were. And I've had this happen to quite a few people. There's another woman that got a cosmic beacon from me. And unfortunately, there are two parts of your consciousness. There's the divine light part, which is the potential of you becoming the giant, in the same way that if you look at an acorn, there's the potential of a full-grown tree inside of that acorn. Most acorns that are produced will never become that full-grown tree because a lot of them are destroyed. A lot of them refuse to settle into the fertility of the soil in order for the event of their transformation to take place into a tree. So a lot of them just are moved around and they just sit there dormant. Humans also have that same potential to become something far greater than what their body represents at the moment. And that is to be one day an archangel, a god, an ascended master, an exalted being, a planet, a star, an entire universe. There are actually universes that were once humans on different star systems, and they developed their consciousness to become the great expanse of an entire universe. It's a real thing. If you look at the intelligence of the kinetic weapon that Thor uses, Mjolnir is the actual energy of an entire planet in one hammer, which is the reason why when it's wielded, it has great kinetic energy. But when you go back to humans, there was a woman that basically exercised the wrong part of her ego. Instead of using the divine potential, she began to grow the divine darkness, which is what Lord Thoth talks about, the brilliant dark brightness. And when your intentions are not clear, pure, and sincere, you develop an ability to become someone like Adolf Hitler. Now, Adolf Hitler was a brilliant man, but he had grown the darker nature of who he was instead of the light nature, which is why he became a homicidal maniac. And please, I'm not lifting him up. I'm just saying. So this woman got the cosmic beacon from me, and she immediately began to speak in tongues. And I questioned her, and I said, well, I automatically knew that somehow she had aligned herself with the darker side of her ego because she had saw some visions of certain other gods, and she equated her ego with that, and it started to flourish. So when she told me that she was speaking in tongues, I said, this could be dangerous, because when you speak in tongues, it should be something that you understand. So for all of the people in church, unfortunately, that are speaking in tongues, An appointed tongue is different from speaking in tongues. Speaking in tongues is an inaudible event that you don't understand why it's occurring. But when you speak with an appointed tongue, there are people listening to me right now. And I have at times an appointed tongue. So it's going to appear to 1,000 different people that I'm speaking directly to them. And they'll understand and they'll say, oh my goodness, he's speaking to me. But it's the energy of a divine appointed tongue. That's the difference between the two. So it is a responsibility that everyone has within them to make sure that their growth is on the divine light side, lest you become a maniac on the darker, brilliant side, which is the mistake that Lucifer made when he devolved away from the light that he once had within him. That's an example. So coming to something like a seminar is a very rare event, because a long time ago, people waited for years to go into the mystery schools. They had to wait 20 years, 40 years. And then they had to do things they didn't buy their way into it, but they had to show the high priest that they were worthy of it. So it's really like the initiation of a shaman. If you look at Credo Mitwa, you've heard of Credo Mitwa before, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right? Was given the invitation to become a shaman. And in order to prove that he was worthy, you know the story, right? They made him go to a graveyard and dig up a body. And he had to take one of the fingers, go back to the person and eat the finger to show that he was ready and worthy for the bestowal of the knowledge that comes from the shamanic schools, if you will. So nowadays, when someone comes to a seminar, the stringencies have been laxed. So when people say to me, well, your seminars cost $300, $500, I can't afford that, then you're not ready. And what happens is you're not being asked to do some of the things that were done in the mystery schools, but yet what I'm teaching is not only mystery school knowledge, but you're being given an opportunity to have different things that you won't be able to find anywhere else. So right now, it's a rare occurrence. I give these seminars 4 times a year, and I'm giving things that come directly from the gods, which are ritual, hypernatural magic, words of power, sequence of power. And they are very, very unique. And it's not something that you can look, as I said before, on Wikipedia in research. Very little of what the spiritual world has to offer is encoded on YouTube or Wikipedia. Yet and still, when it is applied by the participant or the aspirant who attends the seminar, it shows in the outcome of their application, which is fantastic. And that's what I like to expose people to.
Absolutely. And if you could also tell us more about Thoth or Thoth. He is one of the most fascinating deities talked about through time and space, and the information that he supposedly brought to the people. It's incredible. So when you had that connection and you said you just knew it was Thoth, do you still communicate?
Yes, every day I connect with his, I have a large painting. I wish I could show it to you, but I have a large painting with Lord Thoth is behind me holding a staff, and he's on my left-hand side, and Sri Lakshmi, who is my divine mother, is on my right-hand side. And before I leave my home every day, I commune with them. They are my patrons. And when I connect with them, they give me assignments of things that I am to do in this world. And it's very important that people have a connection. And I don't mean, a connection to a real being in the universe that is about real power, love, and change that is for the positive. And when people don't have a connection to a deity or a principality, they're basically like a leaf blowing in the wind. They're like a tree that doesn't have any roots. They're not going to be able to withstand a lot of the changes that life is guaranteed to deliver to you. So there are times where Lord Thoth speaks to me through the dreams that other people have about me. I have taught classes with him in the ethereal stages. I have given people words of power that he's given to me, that when I wake up in the morning, I have to write them down and I have to draw them out. And because I'm an artist, it's automatically in my higher consciousness. And when I do look at them, you can feel the power that comes from them. There have been people that have come to, I had a seminar called Hypernatural Magic that it was a gift that he actually gave me. Lord Toth said that you will teach this seminar, but you can only do it once on every continent. So we did it one time in America. We went to London and we did it. We're actually going to take a trip to Kemet in February 16th, and which is in Africa. So I'll be able to do the seminar there again. In that seminar, I give words of power. There are about 6 of them. And each one of these words come directly from the consciousness of Lord Toth. And when you use the words of power, they rearrange the reality that you have around you. One of the words that I've gotten from him, it destroys the energy of a demon. It destroys the energy of any type of polarity that is built upon the tapestry of chaos. The moment that you say it, it automatically pixelates that energy. And I've seen it work. It's very interesting. There are people that have come to my seminar and I will look into their eyes and I will say that word of power because I can see the energy and the attachment of certain darker forms on some people. And when I say that, there was one lady that came to the seminar and she fell on the floor and she began to shake and she was going back and forth because the demons were leaving her body. There was another woman, the woman that I actually met. I don't think she'll mind me calling her name. She's one of my initiates. Her name is Elisa. Hi, Elisa. Love you very much. She has become somewhat of an officer in my organization, and she's a very powerful shamanist, and she's a professor also. She teaches. She's very, very erudite and learned. And she had to do some work on her energy work and calm this woman down and close down her, she had to close down her chakra system because there were about 15 demons that were climbing all over the wall. So we had to sage the place, open up the windows and the doors and allow these demons to flee. They weren't pixelated because I didn't say the word 3 times. I said it once and they had to completely leave her body. There is also something that I do called, it is a cord cutting. There's an off-world dagger, if you can imagine, that wasn't created in this world that I've been gifted with. And I came upon it in a little bookstore that was in San Francisco. It was in between, actually, no, it was in between San Francisco and Oakland. It's in a little place called Marin. When I walked into this place, it jumped out at me and I saw it in a case and I said, "What is that?" And the lady said, "I don't know, but it's been here for a long time. And, you know, people always ask about it, but no one buys it." It was kind of expensive. And there was a statue of Lakshmi in the back. So I went to the back, and the moment I saw the statue, I took off my shoes and I prostrated to Lakshmi because she's my divine mother, and I communed with her. And I left a donation there because there were some people that could leave a donation, and that's an offering for anyone who needs it. So when I was leaving, I heard my mother's voice. "That object was placed there for you. Get it." I said, and I always obey when I hear that. So I bought it. And my friend Alma, who was with me, she said, "What is that? Why did you get that?" I said, "I don't know, but I was told to buy it." So I went on to Las Vegas and I did a seminar. At this time, I was doing a seminar called Angels, Gods, and Altars. I went downstairs and I was having something to eat. And I heard this rumbling and I looked up and I said, "Oh my," and I looked, and what I saw was, this is what I saw. Let me see if I can show it to you. See that? So Archangel Michael, Archangel Gabriel, I saw people burning in hell. I saw Gabriel blowing trumpets. I saw the Buddha kingdom looking in on this reality. And if you look here, you'll see that this is the weighing of the hearts. This is Lord Toth. This is Anpu and Amit and Aset. They were doing their job in weighing the hearts. I saw all of these things. And then I saw me cutting cords from people with this object. And I'm sitting there, and it was very, very strange. I looked, and then I saw this energy coming towards me, and it downloaded, and then I began to weep, and I couldn't stop weeping. I cried for about, it was really embarrassing because there are people walking in and they saw me, and I'm like trying to hide my face, like, oh God, these people are gonna think I'm crazy. And I stood there, and people were like, are you okay? I'm like, I'm okay. I'm just, you know. And when it was over, I went back up to my room, and I called Archangel Michael. I have a way of calling him, and I said, Michael, what was that? What was that? And what he told me was, he said, you have been given the current that's going to link with that off-world object that you have. And then he explained to me what it was. He said, this is something that's been built in the celestial kingdom by the gods. And the moment that it comes in contact with the people that you're going to serve, it's going to cut away people from, there's a spider web around people energetically, and they're called cords, KHORDS. In the moment that this comes into contact, it will cut people away from the cords. What are the cords? The cords are energetic attachments that people have made through agreements, pacts, bindings. Some of them are from other lifetimes, if you will, and people become immobile and they can't manifest things because they have this cord that connects them to an event, to an agreement, to a broken pact that they've even made with even certain some gods. And the person is completely forgotten about it. There's a show called Empire. You ever watched Empire?
I haven't, but I've seen the previews. It looks pretty good.
Okay. So, yeah, I think you'll like Empire. So last week, I believe, Forrest Whitaker, who, love you, Forrest. Forrest is a friend of mine, and he's on that show. And there's a guy, and stay with me because it's a really layered point. So Forrest plays someone, and Terrence Howard plays the lead on the show. Terrence Howard has amnesia, his character. So when he came across Forrest Whitaker realized, he's talking to his friend, but his friend has amnesia. So his friend, who happens to be Terrence Howard, is seeking information to see if he can kind of get some things that he used to do, but he doesn't remember. So when he asked Forrest Whitaker, tell me about some of the songs that I wrote, they're all sitting at a table, and Forrest Whitaker says, why don't you tell him about the trunk? And Forrest says, Terrence Howard says, you tell him. But he can't tell him because he doesn't remember. So Forrest Whitaker goes on to tell him about the trunk, how Terrence Howard's character violently assaulted this guy and did all these horrible things and threw him in the trunk. And as he's reciting this story, Terrence, who was the agitator, the antagonist of this actions, of these series of violent actions, he started to have a visceral effect to the avarice of what he did, unbeknownst to his current situation of being having amnesia. So he had a violent reaction to the recantation of this story, and he had to get up and leave the table. This is one of the reasons why humans don't remember their past lives. And a lot of what happens on the dreamscape is because we would be paralyzed under the weight and the heartbreak of some of the things that we have executed unceremoniously throughout the lifetimes to other people, how we broke into other people's hearts and we stole things. Everyone has killed people. Everyone has killed many people. There's not many people on the planet who has not been engaged in war, in skirmishes. And we are given leave of carrying the weight around from lifetime to lifetime by having our memories wiped so that we don't have to carry that around. But anyway, sometimes energetically, the energy is so egregious that it creates a cord on the soul. And the person walks around trying to manifest money, trying to manifest a meaningful relationship, trying to manifest happiness, trying to manifest what the mission is, what their purpose is. And they're not able to do that because they have a cord that blocks the ability of that blessing coming to them. And this is not something that you could research on Wikipedia. Yet and still, When I put this on people and I cut people's cords away, people begin to weep. People begin to cry, and they can't stop crying. Some people cry for weeks. And when I ask them why they're crying, they're saying that I just had this sense of freedom. I feel like I lost something and now it's back, and I'm crying for joy. There are people that have passed out. There are people that have had an orgasm when I put this object on their auric field. So this is a celestial divine object that allows me to cut people free from the impediment of their cords. And all humans have cords unbeknownst to them. So these are some of the things that I bring about, or that I've been given. And Archangel Michael and Archangel Gabriel oftentimes are right behind me. And the energy comes from partially the gods. And he also adds some of his celestial energy from the sword that he has. By the way, he is someone also that I've worked with for a very long time. And he works directly for the Creator. And he also ensouls a lot of the knowledge that humans don't know about. So when I speak about some of these things in my seminars, none of these things really are on YouTube. A lot of people get freaked out, but in a good way. But it sparks people, and they say, wow, I've never heard of that before, but I know it has to be true because my soul is indicating that. And when I'm telling people and I look out at the audience, I see some people, they're moving like this. I see people's kundalini start to become alive in them. And it's because their soul is indicating to them that what you are hearing is the empirical divine reality as it is, even though you won't find anything written about it, but their soul is confirming that for them. So that's one of the many benefits of people attending the seminars, and that's one of the things that they can walk away with.
What is the Kundalini?
The Kundalini is an energetic, it is the oldest part of who you are. It's the oldest part that links you to something called the primordial kingdom. The primordial aspect of who you are was before you started taking form. If you are a primordial being, there are a lot of earth-based souls that don't have that primordial energy inside of them. Therefore, they don't have a Kundalini. There are a lot of new souls that are not traced back into the primordial realms. Therefore, they don't have a spirit. They have a soul. The soul is created by the divine parents. When you have a Kundalini, the Kundalini connects you to the most spiritually ancient part of who you are. And when you look at the medical establishment symbol, which is the caduceus and the winged staff that the god Mercury had and Hermes had, that represents the Kundalini. The Kundalini also empowers the energetic system of the chakras, of which are connected to the 7 major organs. For people who don't have let's not say, I don't want to say they don't have a Kundalini, but they don't have an advanced, older connection to the primordial kingdom. The primordial kingdom it's the part of you that never left the great central sun. It's the part of you that didn't leave. Some Kabbalists will say it's the part of you that never left God, for lack of a better term, which is really the creator. It's the part of you that never descended and began to take human form. And the Kundalini is traced to that. If you look at spontaneous human combustion, which is very downplayed, but it happens somewhere on the planet every day, it's because the Kundalini spontaneously exacted itself and corrupted and destroyed the body and incinerated it within 3 seconds flat and didn't touch anything else. It's a blue, smokeless flame that is about 3,000 degrees, and it can do a lot of damage. It also is the part of you that could breathe fire. There are people that can breathe fire because it also comes from the dragon part of who you are. So when I activate people's Kundalinis, that's something also that was a gift from Lord Thoth. He allowed me to learn how to take people's Kundalini and safely turn it on. And I have lots of testimonies on my YouTube channel that basically it's the people themselves that are talking about the experience of what happened to them when I ignited their Kundalini, not even in person. So I can activate someone's Kundalini from 6,000 miles away, and I will give the participant what to say, and I will direct the energy towards them. Their Kundalini will unlock. And then if they want their Kundalini permanently advanced and to stay on, they have to come stand before me, and I have to show them the way to complete that. And it's something that's very powerful. Most people, unfortunately, will die without having their Kundalini activated. And what I tell people is that the Kundalini is your divine birthright. Most people are in the grave now and they've never learned how to use their Kundalini. They don't know what it is. They don't know why it's there. Yet and still, sometimes it turns on by itself. But it has to be ignited by a master. It's not something that I would suggest anyone try to do on their own. And unfortunately, there are videos on YouTube by people saying that you can turn on your own Kundalini, and that can produce a horror story of great epic proportion if it's not done correctly by a master.
You know, it's interesting. I'm glad you brought that up. I remember reading an essay about 4 or 5 years ago about an ancient occultist, hermeticist, you know, very intelligent, spent his entire life studying these, I guess you could say hidden knowledge. And he had a Kundalini experience when he wasn't ready. And he had serious health problems for years after that, like serious, big time. Yeah. So I think that what you said, that's important. So how do people, you know, make sure that they don't do it too soon? And when it does happen, is it like a lifelong effect? I mean, the rest of their life, they'll have new opportunities because they've actually reached that nexus point.
Well, you know, it really depends. It's really no different from someone gifting you with a Maybach Mercedes, which is a very expensive machine that, yeah, I'll take it, but you have to maintain it. You have to continuously put gas in it. You have to treat it right. You have to wash it on a regular basis when it gets dirty. The Kundalini is no different. There are people that get the Kundalini, and once they have it activated, unfortunately, and this is something I tell people, don't go out and party. Don't go out and, hit the clubs and drink and smoke during the period that you're going to need to have your Kundalini permanently synthesized within you. It takes about 30 days after I finish with them for their Kundalini to become permanent. And then there are things that they can and should do in order to keep it healthy. So yes, it is something that will continuously energize the 7 major organs of your body. And then you have to be taught what you can do with it after that. So once it's kept healthy, you'd be surprised at how it comes in handy. There are certain things that there are other powers that it leads to. There are people in the East that use their Kundalini to levitate. They use their Kundalini to be able to have immediate, which is not the ability to have to sustain your physical body by eating or drinking, where you can just take the prana from the sun, have it go from the top gear of your crown chakra through your digestive tract and emit a sweet manna throughout your body, and your body digests it. There are people that have used the Kundalini to create doppelgangers of themselves. I've taught people, and that's another modality that I teach people. It's called the sequence of power, which is stronger than the words of power because it's something that the words of power are actually derived from. During the seminar, I'm going to talk about where sequence of power comes from and how it works. One of the people that came to one of my seminars in Atlanta, I did the big picture there as well. If you can believe this, Rex, and maybe you can, I gave a sequence of power that would allow the participant to restore life from the dead. And I gave very explicit instructions. They have to start off with an insect first. Then they can move up to maybe a bird. Then they can move up to a small animal. You are not to ever try this on a human before you have gone through those stages, because there can be repercussions. And I'm going to say this on the air probably for the first time. My mother had a complication where she bled out, and I brought her back to life. And when she came back online, it was the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. I've known my mother all my life, obviously. And I saw her leave her body, and it was done. I don't know if the etheric cord was completely severed, but I know that I had to use the sequence of power on her, and she immediately came back into the body. And I watched my mother open her eyes, and I didn't recognize her. I saw that her characteristics had not come fully back into the body, and she hadn't fully reanimated yet. And I watched her, and it took about a minute for her to form the consciousness that I knew as my mother, but she was completely gone. And I tell people that death is something that humans accept as a real occurrence, but in the East, predominantly, people don't die. There are people that just disappear, or there are people that change reality and their body begins to just melt. Death is not something that people have to experience once they have a higher education, but they have to be taught that death is not a real thing. It's a complex thought form that people are taught early, so they expect it. They expect it to be an event that will cancel out their life on earth. In the mystery schools, people learn something different. They learn that they can be immortal and they can walk into the doorway of another reality. And sometimes they can take their body with them, or they could drop this body and take the consciousness of their life and put it into another vessel. This is something that also Lord Thoth has taught me how to do, and it's very powerful. It is also what I use to walk into the dreams of a lot of people that basically will eventually meet me one day in the physical. So if you go to my Facebook page, or if you go to, it's pretty much on my Facebook page, there are people every day that say, Sri Master Gano Grills, you came into my dreams last night and you took me to your class. You and Kuan Yin were teaching a class about, I don't remember, but it was the most beautiful thing that I've ever experienced. So that's because I've learned through Lord Thoth how to take my consciousness and put it into another vessel and break down the doorway of the dream gate and help people in different ways. So these are some of the things that I teach in some of the programs that I have. And when people begin to learn these things, it's easier for them to disassociate themselves with the limitation of the human default program and become more of that tree that's inside of the acorn over time.
That's incredible. And also, you talk about this being able to transfer your consciousness into a different vessel, this transhuman movement, where it seems to be it's going to be machines with consciousness that will have the cutting edge in the future, the advantage. Do you ever ask these deities that are just a little bit different in the vibrational frequency to where most people can't see them and can't experience it because they're just not at that level? They're kind of, they're hanging out down here. They're paying their bills. They're drinking diet soda with genetically modified E. coli feces, and they're watching the latest and greatest sports show on TV. So they don't have time for that stuff, man. They got to do what's important. Let's talk about that. I mean, where do we go from there?
Well, I've actually have seen a future timeline that Earth is more likely than not going to be upon. And, I don't want to, I don't want to downtrodden anybody, but this temporal form is an analog, and it will be outdated and it will be canceled. Humans will eventually become bio creatures. They'll be semi-robotic, and that is something that will be a reality. The human body is very, very limited. And if you look at right now, even, how they're able to clone and how they're able to have artificial intelligence, something that's already happening. Eventually, the human form, the way that it is now, with its misunderstood abilities and limitations, will be replaced by something that is by and large pretty much artificial. And then also that brings about, well, will there be a soul inside of the body? To a large degree, but that's also going to bring about a very, very different kind of race. And this is one of the reasons why a lot of the extraterrestrials are harvesting the DNA now before that happens, because extraterrestrials also know that this form eventually will die, and they want to have the organic Homo sapien form for their dying races as well, because it also has a lot of potential that this new form will not have. And that's why those things are happening. But unfortunately, I won't even say unfortunately, let me take that back. That is something that will be a reality on a subsequent timeline. And if we're not careful, it'll happen sooner than later.
You know, and also let's, if we can, discuss the third eye and what that really means, activating the third eye. Somebody asked, could they do that on accident? And what happens when it is fully activated, when you trigger it?
You know, the third eye, I like to call it the first eye, because it's the first wireless communication that is developed when a fetus is forming. And when it is open, a lot of people think that they have a third eye open, and they don't. When you have a fully open third eye, you can see things that are not perceptible by the acuity of how our eyes are formed. You can see things with your eyes closed. If you look at a lot of the martial arts movies, and the blind Fu Manchu master is fighting and kicking everyone's behind, they're doing it from the first eye. If you look at how when someone is clairaudient, they can hear things, or someone is using their ability to see into the spiritual world or beyond the veil, it's because they have a third eye open. There are many different degrees and different waves of how the third eye opens. One of the things that I've been, and I have to share this particular seminar also, in order to use the sequence of power, your third eye has to be touched by a scepter. And the scepter, I have, Archangel Michael had me go all the way to London to a place called Glastonbury, or the Tor. Are you familiar with the Tor?
No, I'm not.
Okay. Well, if you look it up, it's a little past Stonehenge, and there's a lot of history there. It's been there for a very long time, and it's associated with King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table and the Templars. You walk up this very, very steep hill, and there's a small steeple at the top of the hill. They call it the doorway of the gods. So I took my assistant and my cameraman, and we ventured up the hill. And it's where it's the most, or one of the most powerful ley lines on the planet. It's where the Mary line crosses with the Michael line. And when you get to the top, the weather started to change drastically, and we caught all of this on film, and the weather began to crisscross, and I quickly understood why they called it the doorway of the gods. When we got to the top, it took every bit of our fortitude not to be blown off of the hill, because the winds were very, very violent, crisscrossing in every direction. So I had to take the scepter and put it into the ground and let it upload the energy from that ley line. And it was very, very powerful. I had to take it and do some more things to it. Very, very lengthy process. And alchemy and Lord Toth, he's very, very adamant about a very long list of things that you have to do to empower things. So this scepter is what I use, and I say certain sequence of power, words of power, and I direct the energy onto the first eye, and the eye becomes activated. The activation will stay open for 4 months, and there are lots of reports. One of my attendees actually sent me a picture of him taking a nap, and you can see the figurine of an elemental, like in smoke, right above his first eye. That same person also started to see Mumir, and Thor was offering him the energy of the hammer and to connect with the system of Asgard. And he wouldn't have been able to see that if his first eye wasn't open. There are lots of people that have had very powerful things happen because their third eye was open. So in essence, when it is functioning, it will allow you to see things that some people aren't really ready to see. A lot of times also, there are things that have to be done in order to keep the opening healthy. And it's something by and large also that you have to accept, because if you are looking at this reality, but then you see another reality that superimposes itself over it, then you have a choice to make. Do I want to accept this, or did I just smoke some PCP? And it's something that a lot of times, you know, the limitation of the conscious mind doesn't readily accept.
You know, I remember one experience I had. This was, man, probably 10, 12 years ago, when I used to have a 1985. It was either 84, 85 RX-7. So I had to take it to a specialist. Yeah, it was a fun little car. And that rotary engine was great. But so I take it into this specific mechanic. And the guy, you know, just looked like your everyday mechanic. But for some reason, at that time in my life, I used to spend an hour or two a day where I'd actually listen to specific beats and sounds in my mind. Then I'd even take things that I wanted to manifest, and then I'd reverse them and play it over and over and over again. I did it every single day. But I remember this one time I walked into this RX-7 mechanic shop in the Northwest, and I see this like bizarre looking geometrical snake like jump out of his head. It was just bizarre. And it was orange and red and yellow, and it had like all these, just imagine geometry coming out in 3D form out of somebody. I'd never seen anything like it. It was bizarre. I'm like, whoa. I was like, I had to dodge it, man. It was crazy. So was that my third eye kind of activating, or what was that?
You know, I don't know what you were doing at the time, but if you go back to your diet and you go back to what some of your habits were, there are many different things that can contribute to your third eye spontaneously coming open, but that is not something that you could have seen or witnessed if your third eye was not activated during that time. That is definitely a facility of having your third eye open. One of the things I would say also, sometimes I shared this post, before my third eye was really activated, I could sense things, but now I can sometimes see, and this is something that the divine parent has to allow to happen. Sometimes I can see the divine parent cloaked over some of the people who come to my seminars. Sometimes when I'm giving consultations, I can hear the name of the divine parent that's all around them, like a symphony, which is very interesting. So having a third eye allows you to know things. It actually allows you to have gnosis, because when you're seeing things with your third eye, it's real. There are people that walk around with daggers inside of them, and I've seen that happen. They've literally have swords in their heart. Sometimes I've seen, like if you look at this painting, and I'll post it, what I saw, that was my third eye. I could not have seen, it's like a doorway opened up, and I was seeing future events in the celestial, in the divine, and in the physical world. And I actually saw people that had an opportunity to ascend. They were part of the 144,000, and they decided not to take the opportunity to grow. And as a result of their failure, they willingly walked into a hellacious state to burn that inequity off of their consciousness. And like you can see that their skin was melting, and it was horrible. It's one of the things that contributed to the weeping fit that I had. It was one of the most horrible things I've ever seen.
Wow. I mean, that's something else. Would you be interested in maybe answering a few questions from the audience?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Awesome. We've got a huge crowd right now, live crowd, bunch of people that are just having a great time listening to you. So you've got an event coming up November 4th in Vegas. And for those of you out there that want a good deal on a hotel, you can get a pretty nice hotel in Vegas right now. And, you know, even most of the time, because they want you out there spending money, you can get a really good deal on a hotel. But I like Vegas. It's been a long time since I've been there, been a real long time, but it's certainly got a vibe to it that you're not going to get anywhere else. And, you know, you travel the country, you actually travel the world doing some of these seminars, don't you?
Yes, sir. Yeah, traveling around the world is, you know, and I'm going to continue to do that. I would like to do something in Germany, something in Australia, and I'm hoping that the demand picks up to the point so I can offer the people some of these things.
Fantastic. Well, the first question that we have from the audience is, why are we plugged into a dualistic universe?
A dualistic universe is a euphemism. It's an assumption that the universe is dualistic. So when you say dualistic, I'm assuming that you're saying that you're talking about the polarity of negative and positive. Well, when you look at the tapestry of the divine, both must coexist. They must coexist together, because the polarity of good and evil, male and female, is the expression of the lower form. So when you go back up the ladder of creation, there actually is unification. But in lower developments, in lower worlds, it becomes polarity, which means you have to evolve your consciousness to a singularity through unity consciousness and other things. It's actually the proof that the address where you live is not the best opulent place for you, because there is yin and yang, or polarity. You want to get back to the nirvanic or shambolic or blissful state of oneness. And that's something that you can do through your consciousness and application over a period of time.
Okay. And there's several people in here that have asked this question. Great question. How do you activate your third eye?
Okay. Activating your third eye, there are certain exercises that people can do. To be very perfectly honest with you, you would have to research that. I've been given this scepter, and it's come from a lot of different help. So how to do it on your own, I know that the information is out there, and there are other people that that basically have an open third eye, but it really begins with you believing that it's something that's attainable. I also know that keeping it open is important by not having fluoride in your diet. If you want to keep the third eye healthy, you need to have liquid chlorophyll on a regular basis. And I don't mean drinking a gallon of it, but if you take a couple of tablespoons of chlorophyll a few times a day and put it in your drink, and clean alkaline water and high pH water, it'll help to break away some of the calcification that most people have on their third eye. I also know that in order to care for it, it's important to stay away from low gigahertz music. It's also important that you have an alkaline diet. An alkaline diet works in tandem with keeping a healthy third eye open. And it's also important that you're not watching Law and Order marathons or listening to Death Metallica or things like that, because that energy hurts the synthesis of the third eye.
Dang it. Man, I wanted to... I like to watch reruns of Law and Order while I'm listening to Metallica. That totally screws things up.
Oh, man.
Unbelievable.
Bad news. I know, it sucks. You know, it's funny because if you do those things in combinations, you'll actually end up going to the wasteland of lower dimensions, and you'll see like beings that, like Freddy Krueger and Hellraiser, Pinhead, those beings are real, and they exist in the wastelands of, you know, the negative thoughts. But that's where your consciousness will be gravitated towards with that kind of behavior, you know.
Makes me think of the Cenobots. Absolutely. Pinhead right there.
Right. I don't want to run across those guys. They're not cool.
The box. Hey, have you noticed that box that they use kind of reminds me a little bit of the cube of Saturn?
Isn't that something?
Have you ever maybe have you researched anything about the cult of Saturn and the cube and all that?
Absolutely. Well, there are actually large planets that are cubes. There are spaceships that are cubes. And NASA will not show you what those things look like, but they're pretty scary.
Man, it makes me think of the New Jerusalem that descends from heaven. It sounds like it's shaped like a cube, although it's made of gold and emeralds, and it's supposed to be beauty and good. But I don't know, man. It sounds like some type of craft. But here's another question. This is a great question, Jimmy. When we encounter beings in the lucid, in the dream, or, you know, astral plane, are we encountering figments of our own imagination or different entities?
It depends. It depends. When you're lucid, a lot of times the subconscious mind will create actual archetypes of things that you haven't processed throughout the day. There are certain things that you made a mental note to deal with. So a lot of times it will be the subconscious mind will create a menagerie of things and present it to you in your rapid eye movement sleep for you to deal with. And if they are real beings, you can also, what I suggest to anyone, if you really want to look at the validity of who you are on the dreamscape, find a reflection and look at it. Find a mirror or some glass and look at who you are. You might be very surprised to see what that is. And then you have to not shock yourself out of your sleep. More likely than not, when you look at the reflection, you'll say, and then you'll completely pull yourself back into your body because your conscious mind is not ready to accept the reality of who you really are on those dreamscapes. So it really depends on a couple of different things, but if it's not subconscious fodder, which is what I'd like to call it, yes, you can definitely run into some very interesting beings on the astral plane, and they can number in, rank and stature.
Now, once again, you've got a website, a Facebook, and you're on, what are your different platforms? If people do want to contact you, if they do want to come to one of these seminars, what's
Sure.
the best way to do?
Okay. Well, the best way to look at we have a website called galacticus.com. That's GALIGHTICUS.com. And I believe you have it in the description underneath, correct? And there we have an events page that talks about the date, November the 4th. We're having the next Kundalini activation. That deadline is coming up because pre-registration is required. And also November the 5th, we're having at Planet Hollywood, of all places, in Caesar's Palace, we're having the seminar of the big picture. And I will be giving the audience 5 brand new sequence of power, as well as cutting cords and touching third eyes with the scepter. It's going to be very, very powerful. That is on galacticus.com. We also have galacticus.com on Facebook. We also have a Europe, UK Galacticus because we have a large family and community in Europe, France, in Brussels, and England. And I also have an Instagram that I just started, so it's at Galacticus. And I ask you guys can feel free to follow.
Great. And now I see several other questions here. As far as the chakra system, is it organic? And if so, is there a way that you can verify that and prove it? A lot of people think that it's like an implant, like some type of extraterrestrial or demonic implant or something.
Yeah, well, it's organic, and you wouldn't be alive without it because the chakras are, they are some people say spiritual connection. When you have chakras, they basically ensoul the energy of your spleen, your heart, your pancreas, your liver, your kidneys, your lungs, your throat. You could not live without a chakra system. So, unfortunately, science doesn't have a way to measure the different ethers that are connected to us. I think science right now can measure ether 1, which is just above. You have solid, liquid, gas, and then you have ether. But there are 3 more finer ethers that science is probably about 100 years from being able to measure. We have components in our bodies. We also have minor chakra systems that science knows nothing about. We also have higher chakras that go up to 15, and science cannot measure that either. So, when people ask me for proof of certain things, a lot of times I would ask them to disprove it. A lot of things are not provable, but until I turned on their chakras, or I turned on their Kundalini, and then they see an ancient part of themselves, there's really not much you can argue with after that point. When you see a dragon in your first eye, which is more real than your optical acuity will allow you to experience, all bets are off. And when you see yourself as a dragon, or you go to Wikipedia and try to research that and you don't see a picture, there are no dragons, real dragons, that are caught by camera because they're etheric beings. And a lot of times, when people demand to have scientific proof, what they're really saying is that I don't trust the power of the spiritual tapestry because science is too young to have an algorithm of how the world of spirit presents itself. And spirit can do whatever it wishes to do. And the Kundalini is part of that complex labyrinth.
And, I want to talk for a moment about the different colors that are connected to the different chakras. And for those of you out there that might think that chakras, because I've wondered it for a moment myself as well when I've heard about the possibilities, because I've heard people like George Kavasilis, which he's a real nice guy. I appreciate who he is, and I appreciate people's opinions. But I remember one time he was talking years ago about how he felt like the chakras were some type of implant that wasn't good for the. And I'm not knocking on him at all. I'm just thinking to myself that the chakras, if you go and you take a photograph with a Kirlian camera, they're very expensive, but you want to see what your aura is, get one. Ladies and gentlemen, it's the real deal. I remember and I think I shared a podcast where I showed you guys what this picture looked like. My aura was it was crazy, just all over my body, but it was just one color. I mean, it's like I was stuck there in the root chakra, and I saw a whole bunch of other pictures with the Kirlian photographs, and you'd see purples and yellows and greens, and the red would be like the minor color. It was just burgundy. So, that kind of made me think, wow, all right, I'm stuck in the root chakra for some reason. I'm kind of stuck in that fight or flight mode, that survive and thrive type mode. Let's just, maybe I thought I was in a war zone because I was around people at the time, and I don't, people freak me out. I don't know what it is. I can talk all day long, and I can even, but as far as being in big crowds and stuff like that, right. I don't know, man. I love people, but at the same time, I feel like so many of them are just so ignorant that I'm constantly wiping sheep crap off of my body, but I still want to help them. It's bizarre. So.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I have to tell you this, and because you said it's not really a good thing, Rex, to have, a red auric field. So we're going to have to talk about that. And I definitely want you to come to the seminar, please, so I can, give you some positive energy. And I also would say that when you're looking at a really good representation, you could actually see the symbols appear on these aura machines if someone is really, really aligned. It's very, very interesting. And I also would say that when someone is fully aligned, they have a lot of power to basically project other energies. You can feel someone's auric field from, they say that Buddha, you could feel him from miles away. A certain being, if you look at beings that have a lot of power, there will be an energetic shift in the entire room because their auric field is really, really healthy. So, there's a lot of benefit for people having a Kundalini that is turned on, fully operable, and they keep their chakras healthy. It actually makes you a magnet for good things and blessings to come into your life, because when the gods see that you have an aura field that's healthy, they actually can become part of your aura, and that gives you real power in this world.
Right on. Well, I'll tell you, it's been a real honor to speak with you. Maybe just one more question before we close out. What do you think of the Enochian calls, Enochian magic?
Enochian magic, I call it.
Enochian. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I believe that D, and I forget the other person that wrote it, they did a very, very intense study and an amalgamation. I believe that a lot of the things that are written are the real magic is underneath the surface, unfortunately, and real magic that has real power. A lot of what's out there that has to do with magic is very, very cursory. Real magic is something that the Order of the Red Dragon, the Order of the Green Dragon, there are sacred orders, the Gnostics and the Cathars, the Eunuchs, the Essenes, a lot of the mystery schools, they hold the magic dear. A lot of Kemetic magic, hypernectaral magic. It's not something that's really out there for the people. There is angelic magic also, but it's not written in books. So what I see that's out there is very watery, it's very basic, it's cursory, has a little bit of power to it, but it doesn't have divine signature. It doesn't have a great celestial signature, or else it wouldn't be out there. It would be hidden. It would be something that is taught in the arcane clandestinity of enclaves. So Enochian magic, in terms of what's written, what's out there in terms of the book, it's cute. It's good for, you know, some people to look at. I also would not suggest that people deal with Aleister Crowley and any of that, that dark magic, because obviously you will ensoul yourself and make yourself available to some of the darker principalities that made it possible in the first place. And a lot of people are enslaved to those life forms, and lots of negative things happen also. If you look at the writings of the Law of One, it tells you that Aleister Crowley is in a negative dimension now, as is some other Genghis Khan, as well as Hitler and certain other beings that misused the polarity of the mother flame, and it was a perversion. Whenever you use a divine mechanism and you pervert it, it's going to cause you to be on the outskirts of the antithesis of what that is. So you will definitely come to grips with the law and order by any means necessary. Darkness is not something that I would suggest anyone even experiment with, because it will call you into bear. And, you know, it's how the universe works. The laws of karma affect everyone. And you will be given a receipt for the things that you dabble with or the things that you experiment with. So why not just stay on the light side? It's one of the smartest things that anybody can do, should do, and hopefully will do one day.
That's a good way to put it. You will get a receipt for your purchases, ladies and gentlemen. All of you are going to get a receipt before you go to the next store. And what will you have after that? Beautiful way to put it. Always just a blessing to talk with you. Ladies and gentlemen, check out Sri Gano Grills, Master Gano Grills. You can check it out, galacticus.com. I'll leave the links in the video description box. Also, make sure to go to Vegas, November 4th. I'm going to do my best to get out there, so maybe I can show some live footage. Maybe I'll be able to just a little bit. We'll see, but I definitely want to get out there. And right on. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, also go to leakproject.com. Be excellent to each other and be the change you want to see.
Beautiful.